If you're struggling with a lot of injuries, then that's something that I want to help you with. I spent a large part of my life dealing with injuries, and that's kind of how I got into tennis hacking and the things that I do now. So helping people to get rid of injuries is something that's really important to me. So what I'm going to be doing in this video is talking about some of the stuff that you might not have heard before, and specifically talking about nutrition and the impact that the food that you eat can have on your body. Now, the way that pain works, the way that injuries work is a little bit complicated, but I want to briefly explain it. Most people think that we get pain when something's injured, and often that is the case. If you were to tear a hamstring, it would hurt. But we can also have pain without any injury at all, and the science is very, very clear on this. So pain and injury are not the same thing. What we know is that pain is a protective mechanism created by your brain in response to perceived threat and to perceived danger. So that's a little bit wordy and it sounds a little bit confusing, but pain is a protective mechanism created by your brain. We do often experience pain when we're injured, but there are a whole bunch of other things that can cause pain. So a lot of tennis players do get actual injuries where they strain something or they damage a ligament or a tendon or something like that. But a lot of the times when players experience pain after playing tennis, it's not as a result of some kind of injury. It's just the body trying to protect them. It's just the brain trying to go, whoa, look, this tennis is a little bit crazy. You need to pump the brakes a little bit. So it uses pain to try and get your attention. Now, there are lots of different things that can contribute to this threat and perceived danger, but the one that we're going to be focusing on right here is inflammation. So inflammation, you've probably heard of it before. It's what your immune system uses to clear damaged stuff from your body. So when you sprain your ankle, and you've probably done that, your ankle swells up, and that swelling is your inflammation. That's your immune system sending stuff into that area to remove potentially damaged cells so it can start to kind of lay down new tissue and heal things. And as you know, when your ankle is swollen, it really hurts. But the reason it really hurts isn't necessarily because of the actual injury and the damage to anything, it's because of the inflammation. So inflammation actually turns up the volume on the danger receptors within your body. So you sprain your ankle, potentially you do create an injury, inflammation gets flooded to the area, that inflammation cranks up the danger volume, so now your brain starts to pay attention to it. But as you know, normally within a few days, within a week of spraining your ankle, it stops hurting. But if you did damage a ligament, it can take several months to heal a ligament. So the pain goes away long before the injury actually heals, because once the inflammation goes down, the pain tends to go down with it. So inflammation can be a major cause of the pain that people experience when they're playing tennis. And often inflammation is as a result of the food that players eat. Now, I know this isn't something that a lot of people want to hear, but if you are constantly dealing with injuries, they move around, you injure your hamstring, then you injure your groin, then your shoulder's hurting, then your elbow's hurting, and all these different things are hurting, it's very unlikely that you actually injure all of those things. You would have to be the most unlucky person in the world, and that was what my life was like growing up. That's how I got into all this stuff. I was constantly injured. From the age of 10, all I can remember is different injuries: back, hamstrings, knees, hips, shoulders, wrists, you name it. I had an injury with it in the past. But as I started to learn more about this, because I spent most of my adult life trying to find ways to not be in pain so I could play tennis, as I started to learn more about it, what I started to understand that was a lot of this was because of inflammation that was going on in my body. So I had to make certain decisions in order to be able to play tennis without pain. So I chose to remove certain foods that were creating a lot of inflammation for me. Now, the exact number or the exact type of foods that are creating inflammation in your body is going to be different for each person, because people have very different responses for food. So what I'm going to give you here is some very general recommendations. The first one being to avoid processed foods. So if you are constantly getting injured at tennis and lots of different injuries, then the best thing that you can do is to remove processed foods from your life. Maybe having them occasionally, but eating foods that just contain one ingredient is the easiest way to go. So meats, fishes, nuts, seeds, vegetables, starches like potatoes. You could include rice. A lot of people can handle quinoa, but again, these things just have one ingredient. If you think about something like pasta, which has 2 or 3 ingredients, now we're eating some sort of processed food. So I'm not saying pasta is bad. I'm just telling you to think about things in a certain way if you're someone that's constantly dealing with injuries. So the easiest way to think about this is just to remove processed foods and focus on foods that just have one ingredient. Obviously, if you're eating a lot of cakes, if you're eating a lot of candy, if you're eating a lot of pizza, if you're eating stuff like that, those things are generally going to lead to more inflammation in more people. You definitely want to get rid of those and focus on eating real foods. A really simple way to think about your nutrition is to have some form of protein at each meal. So it could be meat. I often use some kind of protein powder, a vegan protein powder, which I know that goes against what I've just said, because obviously it's a protein powder, so it has to be processed, but it serves a purpose. But generally some kind of protein with each meal, some kind of fiber, so vegetables, some kind of good quality fat. So if you've got some fatty meat that you're eating or some fatty fish, maybe your fat comes from that. If you're having eggs, that's going to have protein and fat. Or maybe you want to add in some nuts to get some fat from the nuts. So you've got protein, you've got vegetables, you've got fat, and then you add in some carbohydrates on top of it. So maybe you want to get your carbohydrates from fruit. Maybe you want to get your carbohydrates from potatoes or sweet potatoes or yams. If your body can handle it, maybe thinking rice or quinoa or another type of grain. But here's where I want to give you some more information that might be really useful for you. It's something that not a lot of people are going to want to hear, but fortunately, the best player ever to play the game learned this at quite a young age. And I'm talking about Novak Djokovic. People do have different responses to food. And some people can handle certain foods just fine. Other people can't handle those same foods. But the 2 most likely foods that your body's going to have an immune inflammatory response to are going to be gluten and dairy. You might not like me for saying that, but there is a whole bunch of research to back this up. I'm not going to list off different research in this video. You can take my word for it or not. You can research it if you want. But Novak Djokovic is a wonderful example of what happens when you remove inflammatory food. Now, obviously, before he went gluten-free, he was an amazing player. I think he'd already won a Grand Slam before he went gluten-free. But he was also known for pulling out with lots of injuries and getting fatigued on court and having to pull out of matches. He removed gluten, made a couple of other nutritional changes, and then he's obviously turned into the absolute machine that he is now. The reason, the mechanism behind those changes are he removed foods that were creating inflammation within his body. And because of that, lots of good stuff happened. Now, the behind the scenes is when your body is inflamed, it can't produce energy efficiently. So literally all of your muscles can't produce energy efficiently, your brain can't produce energy efficiently, and when those things happen, not only does it increase the likelihood of you having pain, it also increases the likelihood of you actually getting an injury, and it reduces how well you can perform on court. But this is just my long way of explaining that nutrition impacts people, and it impacts people in different ways. For me to play tennis without pain, which is something that's really important to me because I love playing tennis and I just want to be as good as I can, I love it. For me to do that, I have to sacrifice eating certain foods. When my body becomes inflamed, it starts to hurt and it affects the way I play tennis. This was obviously happening to Novak Djokovic. I make the decision that I don't want to play in pain. I want to enjoy my tennis and not have injuries and play as well as I can. Djokovic made that decision and it's obviously worked really well for him. What you decide to do is completely up to you. But if you are the sort of person that's really struggling with injuries, you're trying stretching, you're trying physio, you're trying all these different things, and your body isn't responding, you still keep on picking up injuries, potentially this might be an area that you need to look at. If that's something you would like help with, potentially we could chat and see if it's something we might be able to work together on. I'll place a link down in the description that's going to allow you to schedule a free chat with me, and we can go from there, see if you can potentially, if we can potentially work together. Otherwise, just dig around, do a little bit of research, see what you can find, but also, you know, do it in a way where you try and stay, you know, relatively independent of the outcome. We can always find information to back up arguments both ways. Like you'll be able to find articles saying everyone's fine eating gluten. You'll be able to find articles saying all people should eat dairy because it's a great source of calcium. But if you kind of dive into PubMed, you'll also find a heck of a lot of research suggesting that maybe these foods could be driving inflammation, and that maybe that inflammation might be part of what's going on in your body. So at the end of the day, it's up to you. If you're dealing with injuries and you're okay with it, then that's cool. But if you really want to address the injuries that you're experiencing, and this is something that's important to you, obviously reach out and we can chat. We'll do a little bit of research and see what you can find. Okay, I hope you've found this video helpful. I know it was a little bit different, but it is really important for me to get this message out to people. I spent so much of my life injured. It sucks. It's so much more fun being able to play tennis without pain. So if you're struggling, I want that from you, for you. That's why I made this video. Okay, any questions or comments, leave them down below. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.